Hi everyone, welcome to another video. I'm Nguyen. In this video I'm going to tell you about the books that I've read in the past couple of months for my Reading Around the World in 80 Books project. I'm going to talk about 5 books, and 4 of them I've actually read or finished reading or finished listening to in the past 3 weeks. And those countries are Taiwan, Vietnam, Iran, and Haiti, which is over here. But I'm going to start with a book that I actually finished already quite a while back, and that is set in Singapore, and that is How We Disappeared by Jing-Jing Lee. And I already finished this a while back, but I had kind of forgotten to talk about it when I talked about the books that I had read that are set in Asia. So you're lucky, I get to talk about it again now. Now, How We Disappeared, let me put away my globe, has 2 main characters. One is an elder woman, and we hear about her story in 2 timelines. One in 1942, when the Japanese take over Singapore, and they enter her village and they take her away from her family, after we see also the effects of the war, and she is then brought to a Japanese rape camp, and we hear about that awful experience for years and years. And there's also another timeline that is in the year 2000, and that starts when her husband died, and that has consequences for her life because she needs to move to another smaller apartment, etc. But she also decides to do some research because her husband, she didn't know a lot about him even when he passed away. And one of the things is that every year on the same date, on the 14th of February, her husband disappeared for a day, and he never told her where he went or what he did. So she decides she wants to find out what that was about. And the other main character is a young boy called Kevin, and he lives in an apartment with his parents and his grandmother. And when his grandmother passes away, she tells him, and only him, thinking that he is his father, that she's not his biological mother. And then Kevin decides to not directly tell his father, but goes to find out what that was about. And as you can imagine, the 2 stories of the elder woman and Kevin. Why don't I remember what the elder woman's name is? That's bad. Wang Di, I wrote it down. These stories of Wang Di and Kevin do come together. It was very interesting and poignant and awful to read about the experience during the war, and I thought that was also the most interesting part of the book. The whole research with what happens with Wang Di's husband and Kevin's grandmother, I thought that was less interesting, and the backstory of that could have been told in a different way. And overall, I thought the book was a little bit meh. Although, again, the story of these Japanese rape camps, that was very valuable, and of course you know that there is a lot of rape and people are, I don't know, in my mind I knew that there are always a lot of prostitutes during war, but I had never really realized that when a country takes over another and that there's still so much friction that they just take girls and put them in houses for so long. It's not a one-time rape or just when they take over the village per se. So that was, I don't know, new delightful piece of information. Anyway, that is the book that I read for Singapore, How We Disappeared by Jing-Jing Lee. Next, now for the books that I've read the past couple of weeks, let's start in Haiti, which is over here. It's half of the island, and they share the island with the Dominican Republic. And Haiti is one of the countries that was the first to abolish slavery, from what I understood from the book. And the book that I read is Faille by Yanick. Yanick has written this in French. Haiti used to be colonized by France, so French is still one of the languages that is spoken there. And this is non-fiction, actually. It's her memoir, her description of what happens after an earthquake hits Haiti in 2010 on the 12th of January. And in the beginning, it's very descriptive. It's still, the awakening after the earthquake and what it meant for mostly infrastructure, but then she talks more and more about the people and the people that have disappeared and the people that have that are still looking for loved ones. And slowly it evolves more, and she talks about the reconstruction of everything that is on the island, and the role of the NGOs, which is usually not a good one because the NGOs take away power more than they do good. So they take away the decision making of the people of the island. So she wasn't necessarily very positive about them, and that also the NGOs don't always talk to one another. Although the help is still very much needed. She talks also about the politics. She's one of the, I mean, I'm gonna say elite, because she does write books, and this is also, it's written in high level French. In French, you've got, for my feeling, the impression that I have is that in French you have more of a difference between levels of French, more than in English, for example. So you've got familiar French, that is what you do with your family and friends, and then you've got courant, so day to day, and that's more your job level, and those kind of discussions. And then you've got soutenu, high level, chicish, complicated words. And in this book, she talks in this soutenu level of French. And I mean, because I've been losing my French, it took me a while to get into it and to realize that I read rather fast to take my time to read what was written and appreciate the sentences and understand what was being said. Anyway, this was a very interesting book, especially the part with the NGOs, and she talks also a bit about the history of Haiti and how still nowadays the Dominican Republic and the US are still kind of looking at Haiti, waiting to take over, kind of. They're still looking for ways to have more power and have more say over what's being done in the island. So this was very interesting. It gave me lots of insight into Haiti, which is, I mean, the image I have now, I had previously of Haiti, is just this very, very poor country. And yes, it is, but this gave it a lot more depth and got a lot more the idea of where that comes from. So recommend this. I can't remember if it has been translated in English, but if you can find it in French and you read French, definitely go for it. And if your level of French is good enough. Anywho, then I want to talk about a book that I finished listening, which is set in Iran, and that is The Enlightenment of the Greengage Tree by Shokoofeh Azar. And it is set in Iran in the 1979, when the Islamic Revolution starts, and we follow a family mostly. The book is magic realism, and while we follow this family, who have a father, a mother, 2 daughters, and a son, we follow them very loosely, and there are a lot of episodes and things that happen to them and to other people around them, and everything is very fairy tale like. A lot of things happen with ghosts and with jinns and with mermaids and a lot of magical things, and it's like a kind of patchwork of fairy tales, of Arabic fairy tales, of Persian fairy tales more, that we follow, that we get to learn while learning about this family. The family flees Tehran because they are very well read and they like books, and in the Islamic Revolution, reading certain books was not appreciated, to say the least, and their house is burned down. And this, I don't know if this is a spoiler, it happens early on in the book, so I'm going to tell you anyway, and it's also one of the things that makes the book interesting. But the narrator of the story is one of the daughters, and she dies in a fire in which their house is burned down, and she becomes a ghost, and she keeps following her family. She does chores, she's there for them when they hurt and stuff like that. So that gives you kind of a feeling of how the story is her being a ghost is not an issue. It's just something that happens, and then things go on from there. She meets other ghosts and stuff. So yeah, when their house burned down, the family flees to a village, and there they meet other characters, and there are a lot more of these fairy tale kind of stories. And because it's very patchworky, and because I was listening to it over a longer period of time, for me, I didn't have an impression that the different smaller stories and the different smaller elements, I didn't feel like they were very much attached to the main storyline. I didn't have the idea there was a main storyline, but that could be because I think it took me 1 month to listen to this book because I just wasn't very much into my audiobook at the time, just audio booking, audio reading, audio listening, however you want to say. So it is very well possible that when you read it and read it more or less in one go, that there might be a stronger central storyline that is very interesting. I really liked learning about all of these mythical creatures and that whole culture that there is. Also because there is this background of the Islamic Revolution and all the harshness that was happening around that time and all of the death and the young boys that were martyred, etc. Also, I think important to know is that the writer, Shokoofeh Azar, has fled to Austria, if I remember correctly, or is it someone else that has now been fled to Austria and that I'm confounding the two? The translator decided to remain anonymous because there might be death-threatening consequences to translating this book because it talks negatively about the Islamic Revolution and that those people still have a lot of power. So I think it's important also to realize that this book, there are people that are literally putting their life on the line to make sure that we read this book, that this book can be read. So that does give it an extra layer, an extra depth and extra importance. And another book that I finished that has some magical realism feel is The Man with the Compound Eyes, which has been written by Wu Ming-Yi and which is translated from Taiwanese by Daryl Sturck. Yes, this is English. So this is set in Taiwan, and we have two main characters. We have Atile-i, who is Wyoyan. He comes from an island somewhere in the middle of the Pacific, a fictional island, which is called Wayo Wayo. And on this island, we learn a lot about their culture, which was super cool. And every second son, when they're 15, they have to go out straight into the sea. They have food for 1 week, and basically they're offered to their god, which is called Kabang. And Atile-i somehow survives because he crashes into a trash vortex, and he survives by living on that trash vortex, and he sees a lot of things that he doesn't know because the Wayo Wayoans never have had any contact with the outside world, so they don't know plastic, they don't have writing, etc, etc, etc. And the trash vortex that he is on crashes on a beach in Taiwan, and there he meets Alice, and Alice is the other main character. She lives on the beach in Taiwan, and on the beach, her house was by the shore, but because of a multitude of reasons, the shore has been retreating, and now her house is being flooded by waters every once in a while, and she is depressed and wants to commit suicide, and the reason that she is depressed is because her husband and her son have disappeared. They went away on a climbing trip, on a mountain trip, and they never came back. Yeah, and Alice has trouble dealing with that. There are also a lot of side characters to this story, and some come from different tribes of Taiwan, and I had no idea that there were still different tribes, so that was interesting to learn about. And the book is about loss, and it's about mental health, and it's about the sense of community. It's about nature and how that nature is disappearing. It's slow burning, and sometimes I didn't really know where it was going, and I wanted stuff to happen that I knew was going to happen. And I thought there was a reveal at the end that I thought was well done. I don't know if I would recommend this for everyone. I think if you like things that are slow paced and you don't really know where it's going, although it's not that you don't know where it's going, because you know the trash vortex is going to hit, but you don't know where the story is going afterwards and what's going to happen with these characters, then I think you will like it. Also, so Alice, one of the things that saves her is that some kitten, just when there's a flood, kind of remains in her house, and she then feels this necessity to care for that kitten, and she calls it Ohio because that means hello in Japanese, and I thought that was very cute. Anyway, that is The Man with the Compound Eyes by Wu Ming-Yi. And the last book that I wanted to talk about is one that I recently finished listening to, and I thought it was very good. And it is The Mountains Sing by Nguyen. And I had looked at how to pronounce her name correctly, and somehow I then forgot, so I feel bad about that. But this book is set in Vietnam, and there are two timelines. One is around the 1970s, when the Vietnam War stops, and it's told from the point of view of Huong. And she lives in Hanoi with her grandmother, and her grandmother is mostly the one that raised her, because when the Vietnam War started, Huong's parents and uncles went to the Ho Chi Minh Trail to fight one another, to find one another. So she's been mostly raised by her grandmother, and that part of the story is about what happens when her family start coming back, and the different family members have different types of traumas, or they're going to have an important role in the Communist Party, and how that influences the family. And they also talk about what it was like on the Ho Chi Minh Trail. There is a trigger warning for rape also in this book. And the second timeline is the story of Huong's grandmother in around the 1930s, at the end of the 1930s, when in the north of Vietnam there were land reforms, and because of those land reforms, the grandmother had to flee her house with her children, who I think the oldest was about 15 and the youngest was still 1 year old. And she has to walk for about 300 kilometers to the big city to kind of make a second life for her, still fleeing for the people that want to kill her, but also going through jungles with her children, etc. Both of these two storylines are told intermittently, so we get a little piece of this, a little piece of that, and it was very interesting. I really liked learning about the Vietnam War in this way, because mostly, I mean, from what I remember from my history classes when I was younger, is that we got it mostly from the point of view of South Vietnam and the Americans, and this is mostly set in North Vietnam, and so that was kind of different, and also very interesting. I really liked the sense of family and how important that is in a lot of countries in Asia, because all of these. So we've got Huong, we've got her parents, we've got her uncles and aunts, and they all live in the same house, also with her grandmother, and it's normal for them also to come back there. And I don't know, this sense of family is so much stronger than what we have here, or at least it's very different. We can say that also as well. The character of the grandmother is so cool. She is such a badass. She would do anything for her children, but you also see her struggling. She has some hard decisions to make, but she solves them the best she can. But she also takes the time to try to grow, so she tries to better her circumstances and become a better person. I thought the grandmother is an awesome character. However, with the characters, I think I would have preferred if they had a little bit more gray areas here and there. They're mostly very good people. I mean, you've got a couple of bad people in the book, but it's very clear how their actions are bad, and the other are all very good, and they don't have a lot of gray areas. Even when they do something harsh or difficult, you know why they do it, to such a degree that what they do doesn't seem problematic anymore. I don't think I'm explaining this very well, but I think I would have liked, for example, in a war situation, you know, you have a lot of harsh decisions to make, and we didn't really see the characters that were on the trail facing these really difficult situations where they have to kill an innocent. And the fact that we didn't really have that discussion as well, that I would have liked to have that a little bit more, because now they're all very, angelic is not the word, they did have depth, they did have face problems, but yeah, I would have liked a little bit more shades. However, I still really liked the book. I gave it 5 stars. And there was one thing also that I thought gave it a whole other level, and that was also better for me because I listened to it on audio, and that is that Quay Mai also in the book had a lot of Vietnamese sayings, and so in the book they would be written in Vietnamese, which is an alphabet that resembles ours in the West, but there are a lot of extra accents and things. But while listening to it, I would just hear it in Vietnamese and then it would be translated. And that also, I don't know, I found that was super cool. You get some kind of, I mean, you don't get it and doesn't really give you an impression of being there, but I don't know, I loved it. And Kwemai has actually written this in English, which I find, I'm flabbergasted. She learned English apparently only in the 8th grade, so writing this novel was very difficult, of course. And also because, and she's actually a Vietnamese poet, and she's written 20, either 8 or 20 poetry collections. And I don't know, maybe it's because of these small sentences in Vietnamese, but yeah, I felt that was poetic. I really really like this book, and I would actually highly recommend it. It said also on the blurb that it was somewhere between pachinko and homegoing, and that it had the lyricism of The Shadow of the Banyan. I like all three of those books. Those threes are definitely up there with my favorites. So, and I won't say it has the lyricism of The Shadow of the Banyan, because that has a lot of dreamlike atmosphere, because the child still believes in the gods and sees the gods everywhere. So it's different than that, but it still has this multi-generational historical fiction. I mean, that's what I prefer. So this book was very good, and I would highly recommend it. I already said that. See you next time. Bye. Thanks for watching.